Among the Ottoman sultans, few ruled for such a short and tragic time as Sultan Mustafa IV, the 29th Ottoman Sultan and the 94th Caliph of Islam. Born on September 8, 1779, to Sultan Abdulhamid I and Aksiniperver Kadir, Mustafa would one day wear the crown of his forefathers, but only for a fleeting, turbulent moment in history. Raised within the palace walls, young Mustafa received a classical Ottoman education. After losing his father at the age of 10, he and his brother Mahmud were brought up lovingly by their uncle, Sultan Selim III, who treated them as his own sons. Selim's reign was one of reform and modernization, but it was also a time of growing unrest. Many within the empire, the Janissaries, conservative scholars, and discontented officials resisted Selim's changes. Their opposition would erupt in a bloody revolt, and on May 29, 1807, Selim III was deposed. In his place, the rebels enthroned Sultan Mustafa IV. When the new sultan took the throne, Selim III told him, "My brother Allah has placed you upon the seat from which I was cast down. My good intentions led to the people's anger. May your reign be more peaceful than mine." But peace would not come. The empire was at war with Russia, and chaos in Istanbul spread to the front lines. The army, divided and leaderless, faltered. In this vacuum of power, a powerful provincial notable, Alemdar Mustafa Pasha, the Ayana of Rus, rose to restore order. Meanwhile, European powers circled the weakened empire at Tilsit in 1807. Napoleon I of France and Tsar Alexander I of Russia secretly discussed the possible partition of Ottoman lands, dividing the Balkans, Greece, and Anatolia among themselves. Foreign intrigue deepened the crisis at home. Within the capital, power no longer rested with Sultan Mustafa. The real control lay with the Janissaries and coup leaders who had placed him on the throne, trying to balance the forces of reform and tradition. Mustafa appointed ministers from both sides, but his authority was little more than symbolic. A secret circle known as the Ruskokurani, the companions of Rus, began plotting to restore Selim III. They persuaded Alemdar Mustafa Pasha to march on Istanbul, promising him support. Though cautious, Sultan Mustafa eventually allowed Alemdar's army to approach the city, hoping to use him against the rebels. When Alemdar entered the capital with 15,000 men, the coup leaders panicked. Their leader, Kabak Mustafa, was captured and executed. Order seemed momentarily restored, but mistrust ran deep. Rumors spread that Alemdar intended to restore Sultan Selim to the throne. On July 28, 1808, Alemdar Mustafa Pasha stormed the Sublime Porte and demanded Selim's reinstatement. Sultan Mustafa, fearing his downfall, was convinced by his followers that the only way to keep his crown was to eliminate Selim III and his brother Mahmud. In a tragic act, Selim III was murdered within the palace, while Kezade Mahmud barely escaped through a secret passage. Alemdar arrived too late. Finding the lifeless body of Selim III, he wept, then proclaimed Mahmud II as the new sultan. Sultan Mustafa IV was confined within the palace. He had lost everything: throne, allies, and honor. A few months later, on the night of November 15, 1808, another revolt broke out. Fearing that Mustafa might again be used as a rallying figure, Alemdar's enemies demanded his death. That night, by the Sultan's reluctant decree, Mustafa IV was executed only 29 years old. His reign had lasted barely 14 months. He was buried beside his father, Sultan Abdul Hamid I, in Emin-Under. His only child, a young daughter, died in infancy. Some whispered that his coffin was empty, that he had been hidden away alive. But history remains silent on that tale, though many chroniclers called him weak or naive. Sultan Mustafa IV was a ruler trapped between reform and rebellion, a man whose fate was ridden by the turmoil of his age. May Allah have mercy upon Sultan Mustafa IV and upon all those who bore the burden of rule in troubled times.